Well, this afternoon, the dignified transfer of 6 Air Force personnel who were killed when their refueling plane crashed in Donald Trump's new war zone took place at Dover Air Force Base. Donald Trump was in attendance this time after he skipped the second dignified transfer of his war. This time, Donald Trump did not demean the event by wearing a ridiculous hat. It was closed to the press at the request of the families, but one of the families has already seemed to indicate that Donald Trump is to blame for the death of Air Force Sergeant Tyler Simmons, age 28, of Columbus, Ohio. Here's what Sergeant Simmons' grandmother and cousin said on Monday.
This could have been prevented. We didn't need to be in this war. You know, this is uncalled for. And this is what we get.
Families are suffering right now. Not only our family, but there are other families that's lost loved ones. And just to create a war because you want to create a war, it's not right. It is not right.
The other 5 members of the Air Force who went down on that plane were Major John Klinner, 33, of Auburn, Alabama, Captain Ariana Savino, 31, of Covington, Washington, Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, 34, of Bardstown, Kentucky, Captain Seth Koval, 38, of Stoutsville, Ohio, and Captain Curtis Angst of Wilmington, Ohio, age 30. Today, Sergeant Tyler Simmons' mother said this in an interview with CBS.
The knock on the door, you're hoping that it's not a knock that, you just don't want. And when they knocked on the door and Milo answered the door, I heard him say, "Oh no," and I knew. And it was, and from there on, life would never, ever, ever be the same. It will never be the same.
There was obviously no imminent threat to the United States coming from Iran that justified Donald Trump starting a war. Sergeant Simmons' family is right about that. And they got confirmation of that. It came from Donald Trump's director of the National Counterterrorism Center, who resigned on Tuesday and publicized his resignation letter to Donald Trump, saying there was no imminent threat that justified Donald Trump's war in Iran. Joe Kent worked in an intelligence community run by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who refused to contradict Joe Kent's resignation letter yesterday. Tulsi Gabbard also refused to contradict Joe Kent today in Senate testimony. Tulsi Gabbard was offered an opportunity to say that she agreed with Donald Trump's claim that there was an imminent threat from Iran, and she publicly refused to agree with Donald Trump. And so the question for Tulsi Gabbard tonight is, will she quit or be fired because of what is now her obvious public disagreement with Donald Trump on his war in Iran? In her Senate testimony today, Tulsi Gabbard said that it is the intelligence community's assessment that the Iranian dictatorial regime is still firmly in control of the country. And here is what Tulsi Gabbard said in her Senate testimony when she was asked, who's right? Donald Trump, who said that the United States could be hit with an Iranian nuclear weapon 2 weeks from now if he didn't launch his war, or Joe Kent, who said there was no imminent threat?
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False. This is the worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up to the president based on a volume
no,
of
it is
information
precisely,
that he receives.
It is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the Worldwide Threats hearing where, as you noted in your opening testimony, quote, you represent the IC's assessment of threats. You are here to represent the IC's assessment of threats. That's a quote from your own opening statement. And so my question is, as you're here to present the IC's assessment of threats, was it the assessment of the intelligence community that, as the White House claimed on March 1st, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
Once again, Senator, the intelligence community has provided the inputs that make up this annual threat assessment.
You won't answer the question.
It is the nature of the imminent threat that the president has to make that determination based on a collection and volume
of
information and intelligence that he is provided with.
You're here to be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
Exactly what I'm doing.
No, you're evading a question because to provide a candid response to the committee would contradict a statement from the White House.
It would have been so easy for Tulsi Gabbard to say, I agree with the president's judgment that there was an imminent threat. She refused to do that, refused to tell that lie for Donald Trump. And in refusing to do that, she is actually defying Donald Trump, not protecting Donald Trump. And of course, she is also lying when she said that the only person who can determine what is and isn't an imminent threat is the president. That is simply perjury. Tulsi Gabbard was asked about recent reports that Vladimir Putin has been helping Iran target the American military in this war.
Could you update us on the intelligence on Russian intelligence sharing with Iran in the current conflict? What do we know?
Senator, if there is that sharing going on, that would be an answer that would be appropriate for a closed session.
Well, it's been in the public press. This is open source that it's occurring. Is it occurring?
Again, if it is occurring, that would be an answer appropriate for a closed session. What I can tell you is that according to the Department of War, any support that Iran may be receiving is not inhibiting their operational effects.
Okay, that's sort of the first cousin of a yes.
And then Tulsi Gabbard had to resort to lying again and pretend that she is the only person in America who doesn't know that Donald Trump said that he was surprised that the Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Wall Street Journal reported on March 13th that Donald Trump, quote, told his team that Tehran would likely capitulate before closing the strait. And even if Iran tried, the U.S. military could handle it. That is what the stupidest military tactician in history thought before he launched his war. And Tulsi Gabbard knows that. And so today, she chose to pretend that she doesn't know that.
The president continues to say as well that, he had no idea, was shocked that the Iranians had moved to take over the Strait of Hormuz. Did you provide any intelligence that would say that it would be, that it was not likely that the Iranians would try to move on the strait?
I'm not aware of those remarks, and I think those of us here at the table can point to the fact that historically the Iranians have always threatened to leverage their control over
why would
the
the president say he was amazed?
I'm not aware of those remarks.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised again? Reports that Iran struck the adjacent Gulf states.
Again, I'm not aware of those remarks.
In the written version of Tulsi Gabbard's opening statement to the committee, she said, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. So that was Tulsi Gabbard saying, of course, Iran had no nuclear capability whatsoever when Donald Trump launched his war. But for some reason, she left that line out of her opening statement when she spoke her statement to the committee.
Even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir. I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
So you chose to take
my oral delivered remarks.
You chose to omit the parts that contradict the president.
And so, having launched a war when there was no imminent threat to the United States, which has led to dramatically higher oil prices, with gasoline prices now averaging almost $1 higher than last month, Donald Trump's chief economic advisor, the most incompetent one in presidential history, said that price increases driven by Donald Trump's tariffs and now Donald Trump's war are, quote, the last of our concerns right now, no matter how long Donald Trump's war continues.
The fact is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
The last of our concerns. Voters seem to understand that, including one Trump voter who is paying those higher gas prices in Pennsylvania, Amanda Robbins, who told Jonathan Allen what she would like to say to Donald Trump right now.
If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You are a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.